Hello, and welcome to our class on how to use batch entry in Freezerworks Unlimited. In this lesson, we will learn how to create new records using batch entry. Now, your lab may have samples coming in regularly for processing and storage. Using batch entry, you can quickly create records while improving the data integrity by automating the data entry process. Batch entry can be used to accomplish the following. You can create new records by scanning pre-existing barcodes. You can create new records by auto-assigning and auto-generating ID numbers. And you can create aliquots and aliquot data for those samples, including the freezer locations. We're going to start with an example in which we have a protocol where 15 samples are coming into the lab for processing. For each of these samples, we're going to create the sample records and 3 cryoviral aliquots, 1 serum and plasma and 1 DNA. We're going to create these records ahead of time so that we can print and have labels ready for processing and freezing. And we're going to pre-assign the vial locations. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so to create a batch entry, we need to first create a batch entry format. To do that, we go to System Admin, Configure Batch Entry. And here we create a new format, and we select Add New. And we'll give this format a name. We'll call it Protocol 2500. We can give a description if we'd like. After the name and description, we tell the format how it is we want to create samples. Are we going to create sample records by scanning or typing in a key field? Or are we going to auto-generate a number? Or maybe import a file? And we'll show each of these options. The first option we're going to do in this example, we're going to scan a key field because we have 15 samples. The information is barcoded. We're going to scan those fields in and then create the records that way. So with scanning key field selected, we select the field that barcode, that field is that we're scanning refers to. In this situation, it refers to our patient ID. The next thing we want to do is determine for every sample that we scan in, what are the fields that we want entered, and what will the default values be for each of these. So down here, these are the sample fields, and we determine the sample fields that we're going to enter in the batch process and what the values will be. After that, we'll go to the aliquots and determine if there's any aliquots that we're assigning as well and what those fields will be. So we select Add New. We're going to add new fields to this process. And we select the fields and then the values that we want those fields to be. Now, one of our fields here will be the protocol, and we want the protocol to be 2500. So we select the field and the value, protocol 2500. Hit save, and then the screen empties, clears out again, and we put the next one in. We want to put a sample date in, so let's select a sample date. We'll select the field sample date, and here we can put a default date, which could be the current date, or we can leave this blank, or we can say yesterday's date or tomorrow's date, whatever the format may be. Now, in a situation like this, maybe we don't know until we create the records what the sample date will be. We can leave this blank and fill this in when we actually create the fields. Right now, we're just creating the format. Let's leave this blank right here for now. And then let's hit done here, and we'll show that we have 2 fields so far. We'll scan in the patient ID, and when we create the records, we'll put a protocol 2500. The sample date we'll assign at the time that we create the batch records. The next field will be the hospital. So let's scroll to the hospital field and enter a hospital value. Let's add a new one here. Let's go ahead and put in Providence will be our hospital. And then the last field will be our study visit. Let's go to study visit and enter our value, and these fields, this field will be, for these records, will be entered as baseline. Save that. When we're done entering, we hit done, and here are our sample fields and the values that they will have. Now for each sample record that we are going to create, we want to create three aliquot fields, three aliquot records, excuse me, a plasma, a serum, and a DNA. To do that, we come to the tab aliquot fields. Now we have two screens here that we can see, two formats. We need to include what it is, which aliquot fields we want to enter during this batch process. And then down here we'll assign the number of aliquots for each, and in a freezer if we want to put them in a freezer at this point during our batch process. Let's first decide which aliquot fields we want to include in this batch process. And we're going to include three of them: the aliquot type, the initial amount, and the current amount. So let's go to add new, and then we select again, the first one we'll do is let's go aliquot type. We'll also add another one which will be the initial amount and then the current amount. So these are, and we can add as many fields that we want to include here as well. As you can see, as we enter these, they get entered over here on the configure aliquots. So there's only three fields that we want to enter during our batch process that are aliquot fields, these three. Now we need to determine how many aliquots we're going to create, what type, and what freezer they'll go into. So we come down to configure the aliquots. Let's start here by selecting add new, and what we want to do is we want to create a aliquot type of, we said we're going to do a plasma. So let's go ahead and start with plasma. We're going to create one aliquot of the plasma, and let's decide, do we want to put these have the configure assignment, the batch assignment to select the freezer to put it in. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's put these into the demo freezer, and we're going to have an initial and current amount of 2. So during our process, we'll create one plasma aliquot, we'll put it in the freezer demo, and they'll have an initial and current amount of 2. Let's save that. Now we go to the screen is clear again for our next entry. Let's hit cancel right here just to show you what we have. So we have one aliquot demo freezer plasma. Let's now add our serum aliquot. Add new, and let's select a freezer that would go into. Let's go ahead and put these serums into freezer 1. Freezer 1 is our serum freezer. One aliquot of serum will go into freezer 1. And let's go ahead and make the defaults 2 again. As you can see, I've created green for my serum aliquot types. Let's save that. And then our last one, we're going to store one aliquot of DNA. And DNA, we don't know which freezer we're going to put it into. We don't want to, or we may know the freezer, but we don't want to assign freezer locations for the DNA aliquots. We're going to do that at a later time. So let's, for this, the DNAs, let's leave the freezer blank. And for the amounts, we're counting cells. So let's go 500 here. Okay, now we're done. We have our 3 aliquots. Hit cancel here. We see for every sample, we're going to create an aliquot of plasma, an aliquot of serum, an aliquot of DNA. Now, at any time, if we want to modify any of these, we can go ahead and go into those. We can highlight it and select modify and make any changes we need to make to this format. The other thing that we can do is we can delete. If we decide no, we don't want to store DNA, we can delete it, or if we want to remove fields. And then lastly, we can assign these formats to groups. We can say certain groups can use this data entry format. So for this format, let's say that group 1 is the only group that is allowed to use this format. So if you are not a member of group 1, then this format will not be available to you. Okay, we're done here. Let's go ahead now and save this format, and let's create some samples with it. Select Save. We come to a blank record here, and let's cancel out after that. And we can see now that we do now have one format in Configure Batch Entry Protocol 2500. Let's go ahead and close this. And now let's test it by going to Sample Management, and let's batch enter samples. Now first you'll come to a warning prompt here to let you know that batch processes do not have a rollback function. So it's a good idea to make sure you have a backup of your data before you do a batch process, particularly a large batch process. If you want to revert back to what you had before, you can just go back to your backup. In these situations, you can also, if you do a batch process and you don't like what you did, it didn't work the way you wanted to, and you want to delete, start over again, you can go ahead and delete those samples and aliquots. But we suggest that for batch processing, it's always a good idea to have a backup. Let's select OK here, and here you'll come to this window, and a list of all the available batch entry formats available to you will be listed here. There's only one, 2500. Fortunately, I'm a member of the group 1, so this is displayed. So I will go ahead and select it. Now, as you can see here, protocol is 2500. Sample date was defaulted to the current date. If I want to change it, I can do that as well here. Hospital is Providence, and study visit is baseline. We can see here that we have our aliquots, plasma serum DNA, the freezers they were assigned to, if there's a freezer assigned to it, and the starting position. Now this is the next assignable position in this freezer. This is where you stopped before. You last stopped entering samples. So D1 in box 2 of rack A is where the next available position is in this freezer. I can continue to assign these samples starting here, or perhaps I want to start a brand new box. I can go ahead and change this at this point. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's say that we want to move ahead and we want to enter these samples into rack A box 3 of our demo freezer. So these can be changed here during the assignment process to prepare it. We have our default set, and we can make changes as we need to. Let's save that, and so we've got that like that. Let's go to Serum now. In Serum, last time I was entering samples, I stopped at box 2, 3F, so now I'm at 3G. I can continue to go forward from there, or if I want, I can move the next assignable position to a different location in the freezer. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. Let's start at box 3, and we'll start at 1A for our serum freezers, serum samples. Save that, and then the DNA will leave blank. We're going to assign freezer location to that at a later time. Now, since our format was set as one that where you scan or enter the ID numbers to create the records, we will have here 4 tabs to create to enter up to 200 ID numbers, the patient ID. That was the field we chose, remember, when we in our formatting and how we were going to assign these samples. And we can do up to 200 at a time. Now I have got here a list of barcodes, and I've got 14 of them in order, and I'm just going to enter these in. Now I have these barcodes, so I can just scan them, and I will do that. I could also enter these by the keyboard. So it's really nice if you have a barcode, if these are barcoded vials maybe, or barcoded reports. Let me go ahead and start that, and I'm just going to go down the list here and scan these barcodes that I have. As you can see, they're all in order. I can skip around too if I'd like, and just scan all these. So I have got 15 patient numbers that I've scanned in that I'm going to create records for. So here are the 14, and I'm going to create 14 of these with this data in my sample fields, this data in my aliquot fields. Let's go ahead and create the samples now. Okay, I'm about to create 14 samples, each with 3 aliquots. Do I wish to continue? Yes, that's exactly what I want to do. So I have 14 samples here, not 15 like I thought earlier. Let's go ahead and hit yes. Now the samples are being created. Then the next window that will appear will be the label printing window here. And if I wanted to print labels at this point for these samples, I can go ahead and select the format and such and do it here and print labels for these samples that I've created, that I am creating. Let's go ahead and cancel. I'm not going to print labels right now. Hit cancel if I'm not going to print labels. And then we see the samples, and here are our 14 new samples. And as you can see, they're here in the order that we scanned them into that template. We've got the sample date, barcode was assigned, and we have 3 aliquots for each of these sample records. 2 of those with positions. Remember, the DNA samples do not have positions yet, so that shows up as 2. Here's our patient IDs, and here's the protocol field. And over here will be the hospital field and the baseline as our study visit. Now notice that this field here, sample ID, is blank. And let me double click and go into one. And what that is that is a sample ID that is assigned when you enter a sample. So when I go in here, it says, okay, this is blank. The code says when you go into a sample record, if there's no sample ID, assign one. So it's assigned this one here. And we can see here that we have our data's here. We have our 3 aliquots and so forth. If I go to the next field, the next record, record 2, again, we have our records and so forth. And as I go forward, each time I go to the new record, sample ID is filled in automatically. So if I save and close this, as you can see, these 4 are the 4 I went into, and they have sample IDs assigned. If I want to assign these at the time of batch entry, then I need to include sample ID as one of the fields that I use in my template. Since I didn't, if I wanted to get these assigned, I'd have to go and select every one of them. Let's go ahead and do that by just simply scrolling through all of these. As you can see, as I do, the numbers get assigned. And now they're all assigned. So I've got my 14 records. Quick and easy, and for the most part, pretty painless. In this example, we're going to go ahead and go back to our template, our batch entry template, and we're going to create those samples again. Only this time, we're going to show you how to do it using a Freezerworks auto-generated ID number instead of scanning in patient IDs. So let's go back to System Admin, Configure Batch Entry, and let's make some modifications to our previous format by selecting it and making a duplicate of it. So I've selected 2500 protocol 2500, hit duplicate, and I now have a duplicate of that. Let's go into it, and in this situation what we're going to do is, rather than scan in the key identifier, we're going to let Freezerworks assign the key identifier by using auto-generating number. And that again would be, we have 3 here. Freezerworks has identified 3 fields available for the sample records that are auto-generating numbers. internal barcode ID, which Freezerworks assigns to every sample that's created, as well as the globally unique sample ID. These are system maintained files by Freezerworks. Sample ID is another auto-generated number that we created as a user-defined field. Let's go ahead and use that one. That's the one we saw earlier when we were working with the previous batch entry, where we double-clicked and went in and assigned those auto-generated sample IDs. In this situation, we're going to select that as the field to auto-generate our records by, so that won't be necessary to go in and assign them after we create the records. They'll be assigned as we create the records. Let's go ahead and change the hospital here. Let's change it to this, and then let's go to study visit, and let's make the default value for study visit pre-entry. As long as we're here, let's go ahead and change the DNA and put it in a freezer. So the DNA samples, let's go ahead and put them into a freezer. And let's assign 2 serums for every sample. And let's assign 3 plasmas for every sample. So in this situation, we're going to create 6 aliquots for every sample we create. 3 plasmas, 2 serums, and 1 DNA. Let's save this format, and let's create our batch enter our samples using this new format. Sample management, batch enter samples. Let's select this new format. And here we just put in the number 15. We don't scan the numbers in because Freezerworks is going to auto-assign them. We've got our data here. Sample date is default to today's date. Let's go ahead and leave it like that. And we've got our 3 aliquots plasma. We're going to start here at B5. And right where we stopped before, the last time we did this, we stopped at B4, so B5 is the next one. As well as for the serum, we stopped at 2E, so now we're at 2F. And our next assignable position for the DNAs are going in the cryo tank, and this is our next assignable position. We'll just keep going from this point here. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and create our samples. So we are about to create 15 samples with 6 aliquots, and that's exactly what we want to do. So let's say yes, and let the processing take place. Again, we can print labels at this point. Let's keep going. And here are our 15 samples. As you can see in this situation, sample ID is assigned. And we have our 6 aliquots for each sample record. All of them have positions. Double click into a record, and we can see that we've got our 3 plasma aliquots, our 2 serum aliquots, and our 1 DNA aliquot into the freezers that we assigned them to. So we've got locations assigned, we have samples created, aliquots created. Let's go ahead and close this. And that is another example of how we can batch enter. The third example that we want to give you is using a import file. And in this situation, we'll go back to configure batch entry. And let's go back to the protocol 2500 that we created. In this situation, we're going to create sample records by import file. The import file is going to have a list of patient IDs, so we're going to import the patient ID, and here it is. Let's go ahead and take a look at that import file, and I'm going to open it up in Excel. And it's just a one record field we can see here, one field per record. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And here it is. We've got a list of ID numbers here. These are patient IDs. You can see here we do not have a header field. So if you've got a list of numbers that you want to create samples by, you would go ahead and put them in a text file. You can read them in Excel, but make sure that if you do, you want to save it as a TXT tab delimited format. Don't save it as XLS. Freezerworks can't read the Excel format. It needs to read the standard ASCII text format, which is down here. So we've already done that. So let's go ahead and import these numbers and create samples for these. So import file, we'll leave this set up the way it is, and let's go ahead and hit save, and now we will batch enter those samples. We come and select that protocol, or that format, and down here we see import IDs. Let's go ahead and import the IDs by selecting that. This is the file we want to import. 10 numbers are imported correctly, so they're imported. Now the next step is to create those samples based on those numbers. So let's create 10 samples, each with 3 aliquots. Again, we're not going to print labels at this point. And here are our 10 samples, each with 3 aliquots. And these are the patient IDs that we imported. In fact, let's go ahead and take a look at that. We can see here that we've got our 10 sample patient IDs were imported and the records were created. Double click and we can go in and look at our import. So in conclusion, let's remember some things about batch entry, things to keep in mind. Whenever we batch enter samples with user-defined fields that have default rules, these rules do not take effect under batch entry. So include these in your batch entry format. When you're creating a batch entry format and you've got fields that usually you have entered that are default, these won't be created unless you include them in your batch entry format, those fields, and then place the default entry in your format as well. Also, again, we saw this earlier, if you have a user-defined field that is an auto-generated number, and it will not be created in the batch entry format unless you include that as a key identifier, as we did in the second example too. We created the sample ID, made the sample ID the key identifier, and then they were created during batch entry. Whereas if we didn't include that, then we had to go into each record individually to auto-generate those numbers. Also, just remember that we don't have to enter aliquot data during batch entry. We can just create sample records and leave the aliquot field information tab screen blank. But we can then, if we do something like that, we could always create aliquot records at a later time. This concludes our class on batch entry, and thank you very much for attending. Bye-bye.